All right.
All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan Orrick, here with special guest host, Brennan Boylan, co host of the Bayou Blitz, our sister podcast, on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Brennan, how you doing tonight?
So far, so good. It's nice to be back. I haven't joined you in quite a few months, so it's good to be back. Excited to see a lot of familiar faces in the chat that hang out with Bob and I on Wednesday night. But Bob's on vacation, so the least I can do is fill in for him. And I don't know if I can get to the whole angry Bob levels that he may get on this show, but I'm going to certainly try.
Well, it's actually Bob's second anniversary. He and his wife, I think, are back at the same place they had their wedding 2 years ago. So, congratulations again, Bob. I sent you and Lauren both a message today. Y'all have a good one. Great couple, great people. I think y'all even have Will with y'all on this vacation, which that's not really an anniversary vacation. It's supposed to be just the couples. You're not supposed to bring the kids to those things. Brennan,
I can't relate not having kids, but that certainly
ah,
sounds about right. Can't have the kids.
absolutely, Brennan. I wanted to get your thoughts on the Saints mini camp training camp so far. We are now into week 2 of training camp. I know you're up in Charlotte, so you don't get to see these things in person, but from what you have read and what you have seen on YouTube or whatever, I'd like to get your thoughts on what you think, where you think the team is at this point.
Yeah, luckily, being able to hang out with Bob on Wednesdays and still have.
Okay, I don't know what happened. That kind of kicked you out of there. Go ahead and say what you were saying earlier.
Yeah, that was weird. That's the first time that's ever happened on StreamYard for me. It just kicked me out and said something went wrong. But
Yeah.
okay, we're back. Take two. No, I think for me, even though being in Charlotte, spending the years that I did with Saints News and hanging out with Bob, and obviously keeping up with those guys a little bit, I'd like to think I'm still in the loop. So when it comes to training camp, I think, and Bob and I talked about this last week, Alan, is a lot of people are kind of holding their breaths because of the struggles that people were seeing offensively. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that, the defensive unit was really good last year, especially that back half of the season. What, 8 straight games where they didn't allow more than 21 points in the back half of
Hmm.
the year. So you already have some continuity there. Guys are used to playing together. And that certainly showed the first few days. But the offense is starting to pick it up. Offense has looked really well, specifically Rashid Shaheed, specifically Chris Olave, have certainly had their moments in camp. It's hard until guys are really hitting to get a total read on running backs. But I know that they're excited to have Jamal there. Kendre has shown some flashes, and I think Alvin Kamara every offseason comes in fantastic shape. We see the workout videos, we see the crazy training balance type of things that he does year in and year out. So you know that he's in the best shape possible as well. I just thought it was going to take time for Derek Carr and the offense. I mean, and rightfully so. Derek's first year in the New Orleans system, and for a lot of these guys that have came in, I mean, even if you want to point at a guy like Michael Thomas who hasn't played in like 3 years, it's going to take him time to get reacclimated. It's going to take time for Derek Carr to get used to just really controlling the offense and being with his teammates, and so on and so forth. So seeing the offense pick up the last few days has certainly been an encouraging sign. I think the other thing too, people have really high expectations or low. I've seen it both ways for Michael Thomas and what should be his return to the football field, hopefully consistently. But he's definitely showing that he's a guy that has been out of football for a while. That's not saying he's not in football shape, but he's just not as sharp. Um, and again, that's to be expected. I know. I know if I was not doing my job for 3 years. Let's say I took a 3-year hiatus from my 9 to 5 job, and all of a sudden, 3 years later, they throw me in. They're like, "All right, you're going to be performing and doing the same things you were 3 years ago." It would take me time, so we should completely expect that from a guy like Michael Thomas and an NFL profession as well. So those are some things that I've heard over the last few days. I know that there's some current concern about Andrews Peat, as there is every year with his injury history, but hearing that it's just a quad strain and that there's not a whole lot to worry about there. He's just going to be day to day for a little bit here in camp, but we're getting really close to playing real football.
Yeah, the Hall of Fame game I believe is this Saturday, maybe this Sunday. So yeah, you're going to have your first taste of football, and one of the funny things is people can't wait for football to start. They turn on a preseason game, they go, "Oh yeah, this is not real football. This is pretend football," and yeah, I'm not going to watch this very long. But it was cool for about a minute and a half. I was really excited for a moment, but you know, but the point is that we are around the corner. Saints' first preseason game is 2 weeks from now. I believe it's the 13th, next Sunday. So, yeah, we're on the cusp. We're on the cusp of real football. Oh, it's on Thursday. Oh, yeah, that's right. Thursday night. Thursday night. I had forgotten that. Yeah. Hall of Fame game is Thursday night. As far as the other stuff you had said, I totally agree. I think Michael Thomas, they said today he gave a great interview where he kind of really opened up to the media. He's got a huge chip on his shoulder. He wants to prove that he is the Michael Thomas of old. He wants to be the best receiver in the NFL. But like you said, it's been 3 years since he's really been out there playing every game, being in sync with a brand new quarterback. He looks like a guy who has not been in camp very long. I heard today, though, was like tight end day. They all had a good day with the tight ends. I don't know if you've had a chance to see that.
I saw plenty about Taysom Hill the last 24 hours, if you still consider him in that tight end group.
Yeah.
And Jawan Johnson's a guy that not just in training camp, but going back to mini camp, going back to OTAs, people were really impressed with over the last this last haul. I think there's a lot of times when it comes to young prospects, a guy like Jawan Johnson, they have this breakout year, and everybody gets super excited, and then it comes crashing down to earth. I'll use Marquez Callaway as an example of a guy who kind of came crashing back down to earth.
Mm-hmm.
But Jawan has certainly made it look like he's going to make those steps, to make those leaps into being a really quality starting tight end, especially receiving tight end. And I think bringing Jimmy Graham back, while the nostalgia factor is really nice, I see you got the number 80 jersey. Um, One of my favorite teams of all time, Saints teams of all time, the 2011 team, and Bob and I talk about that all the time, being our favorite team of all time, right? All those nostalgia factors are fantastic, but I think Jimmy Graham coming back helps not just Derek Carr, not just the receiving corps, but if I had to pick one guy that I think it helps more than anybody, it's Jawan Johnson because they play very similar styles. Jawan, I don't want to say mirrors because he's not as physically built, but in terms of what the Saints want to do with Jawan Johnson, where they want to line him up, what they want him to do, you can see a lot of similarities to Jimmy Graham's game back in his first stint in New Orleans. So I think having a mentor like that, and Jawan spoke about it a couple days ago as well, is only going to help the young guy as he transitions from receiver to what his second or third year at tight end for New Orleans. So I think that's a really big move in that aspect. And hopefully Jawan is soaking up everything like a sponge because you know as well as I do when Jimmy was in his heyday in New Orleans, he was undoubtedly the best tight end in football.
Absolutely. We talked about this last week, Bob and I, and I'm sure you guys said it too during the Bayou Blitz yesterday. I'm sorry, last week. But I don't expect Jimmy Graham to be the 2011, 2012, 2013 Jimmy Graham. I do think, however, he is going to have an impact if he makes the team. He's going to have an impact not only as a mentor, but just as he's still 6'7". He still can box out and make space. If he just has an impact getting those key first downs in the red zone, things like that, where he may be about the level of 38-year-old Benjamin Watson, we got something out of him. We got something very productive out of him. I wouldn't put him in my fantasy football team, but I would think that he can at least contribute a little bit to make, oh, look, here's the play. Here's the play. That's a touchdown that Jimmy Graham had gotten stolen from him. That 49ers game. This is the 2014 season highlights where they accused Jimmy Graham of pushing off. Yeah, he's always one TD short in my book. But yeah, if you can get that kind of stuff out of Graham, I think that's great, and I do think he's going to be very helpful from the leadership standpoint in the locker room and in that tight end room.
Yeah, I think the one thing when it comes to Jimmy, and I'm glad you brought up Ben Watson because, man, Ben Watson is super underappreciated for his time in New Orleans. Obviously, depending who you ask, and I've had a pleasure. Ben's initially from South Carolina, so I've had a chance to speak to Ben a few times and see him when he's came back to his hometown. His father's a pastor down here, or down in South Carolina, not too far from where I live. So, like I said, I've got to connect with Ben a few times over the years, just outside of the media as well. And Ben's just an A-plus guy that, like I said, never got enough love for his time in New Orleans. And Bob and I talked about this last week, too. I look back at the NFC Championship game in 2018, and we were talking about just kind of Jimmy Graham, and if you put Jimmy Graham on different Saints teams over the years, if he stayed in New Orleans, I said, look at 2018, the NFC Championship game. I mean, Ben Watson's hurt. The Saints are starting who knows who at tight end in that game. Could you imagine if you had a guy like Jimmy Graham? Could you imagine if you had a guy like Ben Watson in that game, how it would have went differently? Obviously, the game was stolen from New Orleans, and I don't have to, relive those nightmares for anybody. But man, Ben Watson was really good. I would even go a step further than what you said. Was if the Saints get half of Ben Watson's production out of Jimmy Graham this year, it's a win.
Absolutely.
Because Ben Watson some of those years, realistically was a guy that could have been a borderline Pro Bowler. And Jimmy's going to be expected to be like tight end 3 anyway. So if you could get half of that, It's going to be great. And you mentioned fantasy football as well. I wouldn't start Jimmy Graham. I wouldn't draft Jimmy Graham, but my gosh, I already know he's going to be one of those guys on a random week 7 game where
Mm-hmm.
people's phones are going to be thrown through walls because they have Alvin Kamara on their team or they have Olave on their team and they need a touchdown. And the last minute touchdown pass goes to none other than Jimmy Graham. I'm going to go ahead and predict it. I said it on Bayou Blitz. I'll say it here as well for the folks that didn't tune in last week to Bob and I. Jimmy's going to do that 3 times this year. That's my prediction. 3 times this year, Jimmy's going to have a red zone touchdown in the fourth quarter in a tight ball game where if you're a fantasy owner of just about anybody else on the New Orleans Saints, you're going to be throwing your phone through a wall. That's just my bold prediction. He's going to be a fantasy nightmare for people this year, not in a good way, in a bad way.
Absolutely. No, I mean, yeah, Dan Arnold was that tight end in 2018, and he dropped a critical touchdown early in the game. I think it was the first drive.
That's
That's
right.
the
He
one
dropped
game
it.
Yeah, that's the one game I refuse to ever watch again. I only watched it at one time, and I'm never going to watch that again because it just angers me so much. But yeah, I think Graham catches that touchdown pass. I think Graham. I know he has fumbled in the past, but I don't think Graham would have fumbled like Jared Cook did in 2020 if he's on that team. And that was really the turning point in that playoff game was that fumble because let's just say he gets to about midfield. The Saints have all the momentum. They probably at least kick a field goal, if not score another touchdown on that one drive. It changes the game plan of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa now starts throwing the ball all over the field. That plays right into what this defense likes to do. They struggle when teams can run the football against them, but when you have to throw the ball, especially Tom Brady, they know where he likes to go. They know where he's going to be. I think it puts the pressure on them, and they probably lose that game and don't get that second. Brady doesn't get that Super Bowl ring. They don't get that second Super Bowl title in franchise history. So it changes a lot of things. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying Graham would have been a lifesaver. I just think Graham was a better tight end than Dan Arnold, even at that age, or Jared Cook. So for that game, speaking of Sean Payton and old Saints receivers and stuff, Sean Payton has made the news a couple times this past week and a half. First, he went after Nathaniel Hackett, the former head coach of the Broncos. And honestly, I feel like he said all the same things that most people were saying during the 2022 season about how terrible that coaching job was and how bad that offense was. He did it for a reason. He did it to endear himself to the players. But then they've also lost two receivers to injury. I think one of them, Patrick, is out for the year. So they're going to be relying on these blasts from the past. Adam Trautman, Little Jordan Humphreys, and Marquez Callaway. Do you think Sean tells the Bronco fans, I like our receiver group? Just get your thoughts.
Oh my god! I knew it. I knew exactly. You were lining it up. I knew exactly where you were going with that.
Oh, yeah.
I'll say this to the first part of that. The first part of that with Sean making the comments that he did. I think the issue that I had with Sean, I don't even know if it's an issue. I'm used to it. People in Denver, national media, not used to it. Didn't deal with Sean all these years. Sean says it, and then his excuse behind it is like, oh, I still had my Fox Sports cap on. Like, that's why I said it. And I was like, BS, Sean, no, you didn't. You said it because you're petty. You've always been petty.
Yep.
Petty Peyton. But it's a Sean Payton thing to do. I love it. I love it. I hope Sean has all the success in the world unless he plays New Orleans. That's it.
Absolutely.
When it comes to the receivers, I certainly hope he I certainly hope he doesn't love what he has in his room because it's not that great. I mean, I'm a big fan personally of little name guys. If you guys have watched the Bayou Blitz, I've got two guys that I consistently call out and say, yeah, those are my guys. First and foremost, Keith Kirkwood. Think what you will of him, but we're from the same
Mm-hmm.
little hometown in New Jersey. We were both born in Neptune Township. Um, that's my guy. He
Mm-hmm.
will forever be like a practice squad guy, but that's my guy. And then Eno Benjamin, that's my guy. So when I hear you say names like Lil Jordan Humphrey, part of me perks up. Lil Jordan Humphrey, man, I remember Lil Jordan. Um, they're not going to do much. I mean, Callaway's going to be relied on, which is going to be interesting because he's
Yeah.
going to be like a receiver for that team. And
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be really interesting. And his role might even increase because of the injury to Tim Patrick, and then I know KJ Hamler had some issues as well. So Callaway's role is going to be really interesting. I think Adam Troutman, people have really mixed reviews about his time in New Orleans. I personally think his expectation level was way too high from the fans and way too high from the media. But I think him going to Denver is actually going to suit him really well because the one comparison I made Adam Troutman to throughout his career in New Orleans was, man, he'd fit a Josh Hill role really well. I said that a lot
Yeah.
over his time in
Yeah.
New Orleans. And I think him following Sean Payton to Denver, he's going to be able to find that role. But in terms of loving the receiver room, absolutely not. They're going to be a team that is really watching the roster cuts. Because remember, there's only one cut this year, guys. There's only
Yeah.
one
Mm-hmm.
to get to the 53. So I think Denver's definitely going to watch closely.
Absolutely. No, and the reason why I brought all that stuff up is because clearly the Saints over the past couple of years have upgraded their receiving room compared to what it was Sean Payton's last full year with the Saints in 2021. A lot of those guys that Sean had in are gone now. You have Chris Olave, you've got Rashid Shaheed, you've got younger guys coming in that they're excited about, that have a higher ceiling than some of the receivers that Sean had in the past. And mainly because Sean is very confident of his scheme and his ability to, with elite quarterback play, kind of convert his, I guess for the lack of a better term, Kroger bag boys into good receivers in the NFL. Whereas I think Dennis Allen has realized that Dennis Allen's realized that look, you need a couple of studs out here. You need a couple legitimate NFL receivers who can do things for you because that's putting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. I need to have receivers who can make plays. What do they talk about all this offseason? A receiver that can make contested catches. That's what your Michael Thomases can do. That's what they're hoping to get out of Jimmy Graham. They're hoping to see that out of some of these other young receivers too. Make the contested catches. Create separation. Get open, box guys out so we can make plays, and instead of relying on a quarterback to put the ball in the perfect spot every time like Drew Brees used to do.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing in terms of the improvements to the receiver room, it's been really drastic. So drastic, I'm making jokes about this because the Saints went from a team over the years that lacked any real depth. That last year of Sean Payton that you referred to, I would go out on a limb and say the Saints had the least talented receiving corps in the entire league,
Mm-hmm.
given you had the injury to Michael Thomas. But even with that, you still might have the worst group in the league.
Mm-hmm.
But now the Saints go from that to a complete 180 where they're not like the most talented group in the league by any means, but you sign a guy like James Washington, And you
Mm-hmm.
go, you know what? James Washington's a guy that could definitely be a receiver 5 on my team. That sounds great. And then they sign Kiki Kuti, and it's like, oh, Kiki's a guy that would be a great wide receiver 5. I'd love to have him on my team. And then you go, Brian Edwards. Yeah, Brian Edwards would be a good wide receiver 5 to be like the last receiver on my team. And then you go, wait a minute. I got about 7 guys on this team that could be the last receiver on a roster just about anywhere else in the league. That's a little bit of a problem. It's a good problem,
Yeah.
but it's a problem. Um, I think they're talented. I think they went and got some guys that are going to compete and make plays. I think for the first time in a while, TreQuan Smith does not have a guaranteed spot on this team, which is different because there's actually going to be competition at the receiver spot. And I'm not as much of a TreQuan hater as Bob is by any means. I can certainly put the mask on if you guys want me to. I think he gets a lot of unnecessary hate. I think the expectations for him was very high, and he didn't live up to them. But he's certainly a guy that has found and deserves a spot in the NFL, whether it's in New Orleans or somewhere else. I think the biggest thing is going to be, or the biggest thing to watch for the receivers in training camp and in the preseason, is out of those guys that I listed, the Washingtons, the Edwards, the Kikis, like all those guys, who's going to step up and get that 5th receiver spot? Because there's no guarantee the Saints carry 6. They're going to carry 5. There's no guarantee they carry 6. So who's the odd man out? That's what I'm watching for. Who's going to step up and, for a lot of those guys, really prove like, hey, I still belong in this league. It's a good problem to have. It's like I said, it's a problem, but it's a good problem to have, which is a little different for that position.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you're seeing out of this entire team is you're seeing a lot more depth. You're seeing a lot more competition for positions that you just simply did not see before. I didn't do a before the preseason prediction of the final 53 simply because I'm not sure exactly who's going to make this team. I have a good idea who all the starters are. But I'm not sure who else is going to make this team behind the starters. We lost Trey Turner. I thought Trey Turner had a really good shot, not only of making this team, but supplanting Andres Peat. We've seen James Hurst now playing guard over Peat. Even before Peat's injury, he was still pushed to the second team. Which take that for what it's worth. I mean, that's preseason and training camp. Everyone's going through the rotation and looking for combinations. But, they're getting Trevor Penning as many reps as they can at left tackle. How these guys, how the bottom half of this roster develops is really critical for this team, for me, as far as success, where they're going to go with this, because I think you've got some good players at the top, you've got some good depth at the very bottom, but it's that middle ground, and that's really what determines your season when the injuries happen and these guys have to step up. What kind of players are you getting out of that? I think they've upgraded all those positions across the board. You've got more competition at corner, safety, defensive tackle, defensive lineman, offensive lineman, running back, tight end, and receiver. I think it's all upgraded in that middle, and I think that's going to be the determining factor whether or not this team is 7-10 again, or 12, 13 win team that some people are hoping for. I think they're more of an 11 or 12 win team, but 12 or 13 win team that advances in the playoffs.
Look at the teams that have gone on to make really good runs or become Super Bowl champions over the last, 5-10 years. There's 2 things that really stick out about each one of those teams. You can just take the teams that have made the Super Bowl if you want. The 2 things that stick out for the most part, there's a couple exceptions to the rule, just like any rule. They've all had really good and deep offensive lines, first and foremost, excluding like the Bengals. But outside of them, every one of them's had a deep offensive line, and you could see the moves the Saints were trying to make before Turner went down to solidify their offensive line, which is critical. You look at the years the Saints, those 17, 18, 19, 20, those 4 year stretch, the Saints had arguably the best offensive line in football, very critical to making deep playoff runs. The second
Hmm.
one is just overall depth. And I know that's like a really generic term because you could talk about depth so many different ways at so many different positions. So I'll expand on that a little bit and say rotational depth. You look at what the Saints have done really well defensively in Dennis Allen's tenure, whether it be as a defensive coordinator or a head coach in New Orleans. The first one, that defensive line rotation is wicked good. Um, Last year, obviously, the interior of the defensive line had its problems, but he had about 7 or 8 guys that he could whip in there at any point, and contribute, and that's really important. You're not going to see so much out of the linebacker. You're looking for somebody to step up in linebacker 3. That's probably the one spot on this team where I'm
Hmm.
questioning the depth. But you're absolutely right, Alan. Corners, they might be the most talented cornerback group in football. Safeties, you're going to have a lot of competition for those safety spots behind
Hmm.
Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu. That's different. Saints haven't had that in a long time. We mentioned the receivers. If you've tuned into Bob and I on Wednesdays, man, we have sang the praises of the backfield. Even
Hmm.
if Kamara were to get suspended, the Saints still have an uber talented backfield. You can definitely see the blueprint that the Saints are trying to follow to be a successful football team. But like you said, Alan, seeing who out of those groups steps up and solidifies themselves into being vital rotational pieces of the depth, that are going to make or break the Saints in some of these games when guys get nicked up, when guys get hurt, when Dennis Allen's looking for somebody to make a play, whether it's wide receiver 4 or whether it's tight end 3, or whether it's safety 4 or whether it's,
Hmm.
nickel corner. Guys are going to have to step up and make plays. They're going to have to separate themselves. The Saints have certainly, on paper, or like how I like to say it, not on paper, but in Madden terms, have made it look like this is a deep, talented roster, but it's about those guys showing up and playing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned linebacker because linebacker is a position I am very concerned about. Not much has been said about the linebackers. I've seen compliments about how smart Pete Werner is and how well he plays. Demario Davis is Demario Davis, but Zach Line got burned on a wheel route, which that's going to happen. But the other guys, I've seen comments like they've made a play, but not anything that I'm going, okay, this is a guy who's going to step up. I still think they're looking for another linebacker. I don't know where he is, but I would not be surprised in those final cuts or right before those final cuts, the Saints don't try and make a trade or somehow acquire a linebacker they've got their eye on because I think they are concerned about that depth.
I really like DeMarco Jackson,
I do
out
too.
of App State. Missed all of last year due to injury, but I'm also biased, and I like my small school. I like my small school North Carolina guys. I'm biased. Um, he's undersized. Um, I think that's another part of my bias because my favorite Saints defender of all time, which is crazy because I wasn't alive to see him as a Saint. I was alive to see him as a Panther. Was Sam Mills,
Oh, wow.
undersized linebacker. Gotta love those guys. Um, so I'm biased there, but my concern there, yeah, I'm young. Bob kills me every week when I bring up how young I am.
Yeah.
But I think for me, when you look up and you see what the Saints are doing at linebacker, you're like, okay. Caden Ellis was a huge blow, but he played himself into that contract that he
Hmm.
got out of Atlanta, and I got to applaud him because I didn't see that coming. But he certainly played well. But you have Zach Bond, who you mentioned, who is playing out of position, right? Like even coming
Hmm.
out of Wisconsin, he was an edge guy. He wasn't a true, weak side linebacker or anything. DeMarco Jackson, as much as I like him on tape, as much as I like the things that I've seen, this is really technically his rookie year, quote unquote, because he
Hmm.
missed all of last year. You really don't know what you have there. The depth's just not there. Bob and I have pointed to Quan Alexander 100 times. He's there. He knows the system. At least bring him into camp and see what you got. Obviously, the Saints know something that I don't. Um,
I don't know why Brendan's getting kicked out, but I agree with him about Quan Alexander. I don't know what the story is on him. I'm hoping he and he's back. I was just going to say I like Quan Alexander as well, and I'm hoping that the Saints do look at him, maybe bringing him back at the end of camp, just to have him for depth. I thought he played extremely well with. He's limited, but he plays extremely well with Demario Davis, and Pete Werner has gotten hurt before. Bob and I have talked about this. It's very dangerous to kind of count on him to be that guy for 17 games. I'd like to have a guy like Quan Alexander you can go to on the bench to kind of fill that role while these other linebackers grow up. Because I think that's what, like you said before, like DeMarco Jackson, um, Orgy, one of the undrafted free agents. Those guys, Dowdell, I think, is another one. I think those guys just need time to grow and play special teams before they're ready to step into that role. Caden Ellis, I think, was in his third year when he finally stepped up and made an impact, and he was a seventh round pick. So, I just feel like those guys need a little bit of time before they're ready to assume that position. So get a veteran in the meantime. And Quan Alexander would be a good fit in that system.
yeah, it looks like Matt said Quan is in Pittsburgh. Haven't kept up with all these guys lately, Matt. So thanks for getting my back there. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be Quan. It could be a Quan-like player. It could be anything within that realm of guys that are uber athletic guys that can move sideline to sideline um, and can hunt down the football. That's exactly what you want to look for if you're the Saints looking for that third kind of linebacker spot.
Last question, 'cause I know you got to go. Well, first off, real quick, are y'all going to do a Bayou Blitz show tomorrow, or are you letting Bob kind of enjoy his vacation?
No, we will be live per usual time, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. Hopefully, we don't have the technical difficulties. Maybe my Wi-Fi is a little messed up. You never know. I know some of
Yeah,
you know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of you don't. Spectrum Internet is really hit or miss, and I'm at the mercy of them. So we'll say that
absolutely.
Spectrum struck out today. Maybe it'll be better tomorrow. But we will be live tomorrow, Bob and I.
Absolutely. Okay, so real quick before you go, the rookies. I know Foskey has kind of been spotty, but he's a second round pick. He's got to learn the position. Most pass rushers don't do well. But I want to get your thoughts on Brian Brzee. What have you heard about Brzee so far?
I've definitely heard that he's a rookie. He's definitely taken his time. He's had his moments and he's had his moments, if you know what I
Hmm.
mean.
Hmm.
I'll tell you this though, being down here in the Carolinas or up here in the Carolinas, depending on where people are located, I got to hear a lot about this kid. Obviously, a lot of people did. Number one prospect coming out of high school was the ACC Freshman of the Year, and then he got sick. He had some family stuff going on and kind of struggled a little bit. got hurt. I'll say this is the one thing that people really applauded him for while he was down at Clemson were a couple things. One, his motor. Um, two, his heart. And three, especially the things that he had to deal with. And you guys can go on YouTube.
I've never had it this bad before. Um, Poor Brendan. I wanted to get him on this because he is in Clemson's backyard out there, so he would know a lot more about him than just the average person, just because he gets to hear about Clemson all the time. He's popping back in. He popped in for a second. Let's see if he comes back. And it's StreamYard that's kicking him out. That's the funny part.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, they keep
Yeah.
saying like there was a problem.
Yeah, StreamYard's the one kicking you out tonight. So I don't know what's going on. So real quick, because I know you got to go, but basically, you were going to say about Brzee, what kind of player he's going to be. Go ahead and finish that thought.
Yeah, I was just saying that you learn a lot about guys when they go through adversity, right? And one of my absolute favorite Drew Brees quotes of all time has to do with that, and it's when adversity comes knocking at the door. Essentially, are you ready? Are you ready for it? And Brees experienced a lot of adversity between injuries, between family situations. He got sick, lost a ton of weight. So people praised his motor, they praised his heart, and they praised him as an individual, having to go through some of that stuff early, and how that's going to prepare him not just in life. And I think that's really important that these are humans, these are people. They're going to go through their own things. He's experienced a lot of life already, but it's also going to prepare him for some of the adversity he faces on the football field, like being a rookie and having his moments. With all that said, he's a junkyard dog type of guy, lunch pail type of guy. He's going to come in. And the nice thing about him and his position, too, is while he's getting first team reps, he can afford to be a rookie because look at who the Saints brought in at his position, right? And we talked about already the Saints' defensive line rotation being critical. Yeah, there's going to be a lot expected of him, but it's not going to be make or break for him to come in and be the guy from day one. He's going to have some time to kind of find his footing and see where he's going to be successful. But they got a really high motor guy that's going to help stop the run. Has the ability to get to the quarterback, but is definitely going to make his money, make his meal money stopping the run. And that's something the Saints desperately need after the last 2 years of watching, film. And obviously, when I was writing articles with Saints News, it was always about what the heck happened to the run defense. They used to be one of the best in the league. So, no, he's going to be a really good fit for New Orleans, but do remember it's not critical for him to come in and win like defensive rookie of the year. He has time to get his footing put down. He also has some time to get back into like true football playing shape, which is important as well. Like I was trying to say before StreamYard kicked me out, go watch some of his story on YouTube. Getting sick, dealing with some things in his personal life. I mean, he had a really good story, and certainly a guy that you're going to want to root for based off of the adversity he faced in his young 20s as a college student.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing, Anna had commented that she didn't like the sound of that. It's not that he's struggling as out there. It's just he has his up and downs like a rookie in his first NFL training camp. He's got his good moments where you really can see what he can do, and he has his bad moments where the veterans are just getting to him because they know some things that he just doesn't know yet, and he will learn. Shoot. I hope Brendan pops back because I want to thank him for being on the show tonight. It's definitely StreamYard tonight. But I want, yeah. Let's see if he pop. Brandon, I know you got to go. I just wanted to personally thank you for pitching in, being a pinch hitter here for Bob. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk some Saints football. I want to get you back on the show another time when we have much, much better internet access and get you and Bob on together.
Or StreamYard. I don't know
Or
what it is.
StreamYard. Yeah, absolutely. I know that you and I, we last talked during the NFL draft, and we were all very excited that the Saints got Brzee. We were very excited about all the guys that the Saints drafted. We thought this was an extremely good draft class. So I look forward to seeing what this class is going to do once the bullets start flying for real. I think as the season goes on, you're going to see better and better and better football players.
Yeah, I will say this before I head out too. You mentioned earlier on the podcast that some people get to the preseason, they get bored really quick, like the excitement wears off really quick. No, guys, you got to stay for the third, the fourth quarter, because that's when your rookies are going to get their reps. That's when you're going to have some of these training camp darlings that are really going to be able to show what they can do, and see where they line up against NFL.
Oh man, this poor guy. He was only supposed to give us a half hour tonight, guys. He was only supposed to give me a half hour, but I'd say about 10 minutes of this has been him getting kicked out and jumping back in. You gonna try that one?
I don't know. They keep kicking me out. So I said, well, what if I just cut the video?
Yeah. Brennan, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time. Okay, man? And we'll talk again.
All right. Thanks so much for having me. Anytime you want me, I'm available. So just reach out, and we'll do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brennan. All right. So real quick, the final things that we heard on the for day 8, I think, of the training camp. I didn't even look and see, but they have altered the schedule. I know, guys, they've had open practices for the fans and stuff, but because we've been in this unusual, for lack of a better term, this heat wave that we've been in, they've changed some of the schedule. They're going to try and honor as many of these tickets as they can, but they're going to have a lot more indoor practices. And it's for the players' health, too. It's not like the old days. We talked about this before. It's not like the old days where you had, you want to show how tough you are. You want to get in football shape. So you're going to practice that in that heat and see how long you can go without that water and everything else. That kind of football is gone. They don't do that anymore. It's about getting quality work in, and they can get quality work in the air conditioning. It's the whole reason why you have an indoor facility. So just think of it in terms of, suppose it was raining a lot, which it hasn't rained a lot, but suppose it has rained a lot and they had to go inside because of lightning. It's the same basic principle, okay? You want them to get better. You want them to get quality work out of this. You don't want guys getting cramps and getting heat-related illnesses. Corey Stringer, you remember years ago? Look at all these hits are illegal today, like that one. There'd be a flag on every one of those. But yeah, you don't want that kind of stuff happening out there. You want these guys to stay healthy, get quality practice, get ready for the regular season in the best possible health. So I'm all for these indoor practices. It just sucks because people who want to go out there and see the practices in person just aren't getting the opportunity to do so. And the Saints have a really dumb rule right now about videoing practice. They tell the media, you can watch a stretch, you can see a couple of the drills in the beginning, but then after that, you need you all to cut all your cameras off when we're doing all the when we're running in a scrimmage or we're running plays and things like that. But you know what happens? The minute they do that, Everybody in the stands does this. Well, how about this? You can see it a little better that way. Yeah, they all have their phones out. They're all filming stuff. I mean, I find that it's a frustrating thing because as a Saints fan, you want to see these guys practice out there. That's J.J. McCleskey, by the way, number 44, playing behind me right now. J.J. McCleskey, I don't remember how many of you guys remember Jalen McCleskey, the receiver for the past couple years. Yeah, you did see Bruce Smith. That was a commercial before this thing started, Anna. But Jalen McCleskey, that was his dad. He was a special teams guy. And a lot of people are like, I never heard of J.J. McCleskey. I don't know who that is. Well, this is the 1994 training camp. I'm sorry, highlight film. So you're going to see, you would have seen him back then if you were watching the game. Or you're like Brennan, and he wasn't even alive to see the Dome Patrol. Oh, my God. I was in college for the Dome Patrol. I graduated college when the Dome Patrol was still around. It wasn't, in fact, I was almost married by the time, this season came around, 94. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff when people say things like that. I'm reminded how old I am. Like my son wasn't even alive yet for this game. It would be a year later he would be born. But anyway, I just wish the Saints would allow the media to film more practices because I think the fans like to see this. You get to see Derek Carr and how good he looks out there throwing the football to these new receivers. We are definitely going to see an upgrade in offense this year, something that we did not see last year. I know a lot of people were worried about, you know, is Derek Carr really worth it? I mean, the Raiders benched him. They were willing to give him away. They cut him. What do we have with him? And you don't have Drew Brees, and no, you'll never have a Drew Brees. But if you get a guy who can do what this man did to an extent, or you get a guy who can just get out there and really run this offense well, you really have a shot at being successful because the NFC South is so bad, because the NFC in general is weak, because it's such a transitional year. Yeah, I know you are. I know you are. That's not Dalton Hilliard there. That is Derek Brown, 21. But because you're having this transition of the team, I think that makes for. Oh, by the way, that is the only time the Saints ever wore their white jerseys with the gold pants throwbacks like that. The Saints have never worn that jersey combination ever again. And yes, it does like the color rush jerseys at the top, but that game against the 49ers was the only game, and this was the 75th season of the NFL, the only game where the Saints ever wore the white throwback jerseys with the gold throwback pants. Interesting trivia for everybody. Vikings Saints 2002. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Except for the gold jerseys. That's the only game where the Saints ever wore the gold jerseys. And it was 2002. Tom Benson hated them so much, he auctioned them off immediately after the game. That's how much he hated those gold jerseys. But anyway, you really this is really going to kind of pump people up about Derek Carr because I think Josh McDaniels is a moron. I don't think he has any business being a head coach. I think the biggest problem he had was he didn't know how to run an offense that would play to Derek Carr's strength. He tried to make Derek Carr. Well, there's a friend of the show, Quinn Early, right there. He tried to make Derek Carr be the square peg to fit in that round hole, and And the Bucks and the creamsicle jerseys. The Bucks are going back to the creamsicle jerseys this year. They're ditching their old Super Bowl jerseys, which is fitting because they're probably going to be one of the worst teams in the league. But yeah, it's I think it's more of an indictment on the Raiders organization and Josh McDaniels that Derek Carr looked as bad as he did. I think he'll be a lot better this year with the Saints, obviously, than he was with the Raiders. We talked a lot about contested catches, getting a guy like Jimmy Graham, getting a guy like Michael Thomas back and healthy. I think it's teaching Chris Olave. I think it's teaching Rashid Shaheed and also Juwan Johnson how to make those contested catches, how to make an impact on this team. That you're going to have to fight for these things. It's not going to be like how it was in college where you're just wide open all the time. You're going to have to be able to create separation. It's going to help these young players grow up. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to seeing the Saints take that step that everyone expects them to take, get back in the playoffs. And I think what we've seen so far in training camp, we've got that. So, real quick, I'm just going to throw this out to the group. Do you guys find this distracting behind me, or do you like it? Do you not like it? What do y'all think of it? Is there anything you would like to see back there, or would you not like to see anything back there at all? You just want the show. I put this on there because I think a lot of times, especially for younger fans, they don't get to see these. They don't remember or they never saw any of this stuff before. That's Mario Bates there. If you want to know why the Saints didn't draft Eddie George, for example, they thought this was their star running back. They thought this guy was going to be the guy that they don't need a running back. They could draft a cornerback. They could draft somebody, which is what they did, Alex Molden. They could draft somebody on defense to upgrade the team that they didn't need an Eddie George. But if you notice, he's not busting a lot of tackles. He's got some speed. He's got a couple of little moves and stuff like that, but he wasn't a guy who was going to fight for those tough yards, and not drafting Eddie George really doomed Jim Mora. Well, good, Anna. I'm glad you like it because I like putting those on there. I like finding ones that maybe people haven't seen that often. This, like I said, this is the 94 season. Before that, I had the 2008 one, and then I had the 2014 one. I have not seen the 2013 season come up yet. I don't even know. I've been looking for the schedule when they're going to show those highlights. I probably missed it already. But I'm trying to find those things to get that. So, this is William Roaf's second year as a starter. So they really focus on Willie Roaf in this his highlight package, the original Gumbo. So anyway, I like throwing that stuff up there because I enjoy looking at this crap. I just do. It brings back memories. It brings back times where I really got to watch the Saints in the old days. And I've realized that looking at my calendar on the wall, I still buy those Saints calendars and hang them up every year. I've been buying those goofy things for over 30 years. My oldest calendar I have, and I keep all these stupid things, so yeah, I'm like a Saints hoarder, is the 1992 Saints team calendar for the 1992 season. They released it right after the Saints won the division that year, 91, in the playoffs, 91. It was for the 92 season. So, and the funny thing about the calendar is every year I look at it and I go, okay, who's not going to make the team come this next year of these players? Well, this month is Adam Trautman. You know, you've been jumping on Saints Happy Hour podcast, Jerry. Saints Happy Hour podcast is killing me by playing on Tuesday nights. I want them to go back to Monday night like they normally go. because it's hard for me to watch that when I'm obviously doing this show. Um, but and they didn't even post it up there for me to look at on YouTube until almost Friday. I think it was Thursday, late Thursday night. They finally put it up there. So um, anyway, that's all I got for y'all tonight. I just wanted to give y'all a heads up about the training camp stuff in case any of y'all were thinking about going out there. I know you got to have tickets, and the tickets don't cost anything. It's just a count so they have enough seating for everybody. But I just want to give everybody a heads up on that. They changed the schedule, so anybody that was planning on going to a future practice, check the website before you do it, because they're really limiting the amount of outdoor practices right now. So, but they did it 9. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I know they're on Twitch. I know. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us. We'll have Bob back next week. We'll talk some more about what happened in training camp, and we'll actually be previewing the first preseason game, a home game against the Kansas City Chiefs. I doubt Patrick Mahomes plays much more than a series, if at all. It's going to be a different kind of preseason, so I expect to see Derek Carr out there a lot more than you would see a typical preseason game. Just because they want him to get that timing down, you'll see Trevor Penning out there a lot. But we'll preview all that next week. In the meantime, thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.